Right now here at 4 o'clock, we want to tell you about some developments from President Trump. He says Chicago is up next for a federal crime crackdown. He's already deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C.
NBC5's Randy Gyllenhaal joining us now with details on what the president said exactly today. Randy?
Yeah, so fast developments in the Oval Office here. We should note the city of Chicago says they have not received any formal communication from the White House or the federal government about exactly this plan from President Trump, who says he intends to send either the National Guard or even the U.S. military into Chicago. Critics say it could be illegal and unproductive, but Trump says it would make Chicago safe from crime. We'll play his comments here in full.
After we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe also. We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one, but they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next.
Okay, the Illinois National Guard is typically under.
All right, family. So let's get right into it. We got two leaders, two completely different visions for America, and one city sitting right on the brink. And while they're out here declaring war for the cameras, we have to ask the real question, right? What does all this political drama mean for your family's safety? And the headlines are absolutely explosive. President Trump has announced that Chicago is next. And word on the street is the Pentagon is sketching out plans to possibly deploy thousands of National Guard troops and maybe even active duty forces right into the heart of Chicago. And the mission they're talking about is a full crackdown on crime, homelessness, and illegal immigration. So in one corner, you got a president flexing federal power, promising to bring back law and order to a city he calls a mess, run by an incompetent mayor, as we know, a high school teacher, history teacher at that. And he's out here claiming that the people of Chicago are literally screaming for him to come in, which is true. And I say all that because you have someone like Mayor Lightfoot, who was a horrible mayor, but doesn't beat Mayor Brandon Johnson, who's currently the Chicago mayor, who's worse than horrible, than horrible than Mayor Lightfoot. But you got two individuals who did a horrible job of having the best interests of Chicagoans, and they have a lot to say. And this is in regards to Mayor Lightfoot basically saying the opposite, that individuals in Chicago are not asking for Trump to come in. Check it out.
Now is Democratic former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Lori, thank you so much for spending your time with us this weekend. So what's your immediate reaction to the possibility of the National Guard being deployed to Chicago?
Well, obviously it would be a terrible mistake, but as we've seen throughout his political career, and particularly this second term, President Trump likes breeding chaos and fear. But what I will urge my fellow Chicagoans is to lay daisies at the feet of any military force that shows up in our city. Don't show up in mass. Don't show up to engage in antagonistic tactics. Let's show what we know, which is how to protest peacefully in the city of Chicago.
Now, on Friday, President Trump suggested he'd send the National Guard to Chicago because that's what people in the city want. Here's what he had to say.
And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one, but they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
All right, you heard the president's words right there. So what's your reaction to Trump's words and what he had to say?
It's painful to have a president who lives in his own fantasy world, who lies with such incredible ease. Nobody here in Chicago is asking him to come.
No, that's a lie. Because if that's not the case, I want you guys to see this. Now, you have your first, you're going to see two individuals be ignorant and say the same thing that Mayor Lightfoot is saying, and Mayor Brandon Johnson, the current mayor of Chicago, basically saying that there's no black woman, African Americans asking for Donald Trump to come. However, what I find very fascinating is you did hear Mayor Lightfoot before I play this clip basically say, please put daisies at the feet of those who are in the service. And also, let's show them when they do come, the National Guard and Donald Trump and so forth, how we conduct ourselves and not antagonize. Well, if Chicago is in that much of effect of being so much in order when it comes to law and order, you wouldn't have to tell individuals not to antagonize another individual, right? But anyway, check out this clip.
Word on the block, Trump said, Chicago women, black women, very beautiful black women. He ain't lie about that. But he's saying he did put words in your mouth, and he said y'all are unsafe, and y'all asking him to put martial law. I think y'all should say something because he's speaking for y'all. And I know one thing a black woman hate is when somebody speaks for them. So you should go ahead and go correct him on what he said before he go put the police officers and the martial laws all up in your place. Because he's speaking for you, Bookie, but he gonna have the world mad at you. You know how people like to be mad at us already, boo. Say something to him. Correct him now. Step on those toes now so you don't have to break that neck later, period.
Trump said African American ladies in Chicago are wearing red hats and asking him to come to Chicago. Can the African American ladies come to the forefront? Who is he talking about?
So Donald Trump states that he is getting messages and calls from black women in Chicago saying, please send the National Guard to Chicago next. Here's my problem with that big ass lie. Black people, especially black women, we don't fucking like Trump.
He said black people, especially what?
We don't fucking like Trump. Black people, especially black women, we don't fucking like.
I didn't know you was a black woman, Uncle Ruckus. See, this type of guy right here, he's a beta. He's the type of individual where he'll let his wife sit there and take control of the family vote and basically say what direction they're going to vote in instead of actually being the leader and saying this is how we're going to vote on the best interest of the family, also our children from a long-term perspective, because he's so emotional and so stuck to the democratic plantation, let alone identity politics. And when I say identity politics, basically he is stuck to voting for someone like a Mayor Lightfoot, like a Mayor Brandon Johnson, just because for the sake of his skin color, let alone Kamala Harris. But at the end of the day, what have these Democrats done for you? Have they lowered your taxes? Have they also made your city of Chicago safer? Have they done any of these things to actually benefit you besides run their mouth? I don't think so, but let's continue.
Trump. And I can tell you right now, as a black man, I'm not even talking about black women because I'm not a black woman.
Now he's talking as a black man, but he said he can't talk for a black woman because she's not a black woman. But at first he just said black people and black women ain't messing with Trump. Make up your mind.
There are things that Donald Trump and his minions, meaning the MAGA, said about Kamala Harris. I'm not even talking about political things. There were things they said about sexual things, how she got her positions, how she got her job, things about her educational levels, things about her as a black woman that had nothing to do with politics that I as a black man didn't like. And so for you to fucking turn around and tell me, knowing how the black women voted for the vice president, that they are now turning around and saying, oh my God, things are so bad here. Won't you please send the National Guard here? I call bullshit.
Okay. Meanwhile, what you guys about to see, there is a thing as if black conservatives and black Republicans, men and women, right? You know that exists. However, what mind boggles me is Kamala Harris' whole campaign was basically on attacking Donald Trump. And the simple fact is, he's sitting here talking about this ain't even political. They came at Kamala Harris' career, how she got her career and her education and stuff like that. Well, the simple fact is, you're using talking points because you can't even substantiate your point and what she talked about policy wise, let alone the way her prosecution rate was so high for individuals who are smoking marijuana, but then try to draw back and say that she will fight for not so much of severe sentence when it comes to individuals having marijuana in their possession. But she was the very one that convicted at a high rate for individuals who had possession of marijuana. So the hypocrisy is crazy. But meanwhile, these are the black conservative African American women that Donald Trump is talking about. I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump wouldn't talk about something if he didn't have the facts and just be talking outside of his mouth. But here you go.
Meanwhile, still, one conservative group, Chicago Flips Red, is supporting the president's tough talk.
I think it would deter people from committing a crime. We already see the numbers that has gone down in Washington, D.C. already. Within the last 7 days in Washington, D.C., there has been no homicides. So we know that it.
So shout out to these women. Shout out to them. I give them a round of applause. And like I said, there are black conservative women and men. That's not just Democratic people. However, now I want to show you guys. We'll get to Mayor Brandon Johnson response.
Mayor
in a
Johnson?
minute. We'll get to his response in a minute, but I want to add my input now. So look at it like this, right? In the other corner, you have Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker, and they are firing back with everything they have. They're calling this whole thing an illegal invasion, an unconstitutional overreach, and just a political stunt to manufacture a crisis. Governor Pritzker isn't playing games, vowing to see Trump in court and stop this with every peaceful tool he got. And this is more than just a war of words, people. This is a constitutional firestorm just waiting to go off. A high stakes power struggle for the soul of a great American city. But when you get past the political theater, past the angry press conferences and the tweets, you find the real questions that affect every single one of us. And what happens when you use the military as police force on our own streets? Is this the tough medicine a city struggling with violence needs? Or is it a terrifying first step towards authoritarianism, as they like to call it, that just shreds our democracy, right? So we're going to cut through all the noise and break down the arguments. And I want to dive into the laws and look at what a military presence would actually look like on the streets of Chicago, because this isn't Trump versus the mayor. This is safety versus liberty. And it's a federal power versus local control. And at the end of the day, it's about what kind of country we want to live in. So stick with me as we unpack one of the most volatile political battles of our time. So to really get what's happening here, you got to understand the battlefield itself, because Chicago, for decades, this city has been a national symbol, but it's a symbol with totally fractured identity. Because on one hand, you got the Chicago, they sell to tourists the city of big shoulders, amazing architecture, world-class museums, big business, incredible food, and it's a city of resilient, hardworking people. But then there's the other story, right? The darker one that's been burned into the country's mind with one word: Chirac. And this is the Chicago you see in the headlines, a city defined by gun violence and tragedy, with neighborhoods trapped in a cycle of poverty. And it's a narrative that politicians, especially on the national level, have used for years to score points. And President Trump loves this imagery, repeatedly painting Chicago as a killing field and a war zone. And the argument from the White House goes something like this. They point to the statistics that for 4 years put Chicago at the top for the total numbers of homicides. And they talk about a murder rate that has been significantly higher than in LA or New York City. And they talk about all the illegal guns they pulled off the streets and a massive spike in car thefts. And this is the problem that the Trump administration says is coming to solve. And this is their justification for sending in the troops. But here's the thing. The leaders actually on the ground in Chicago, they're telling a radically different story. And they argue that this whole narrative isn't just old, it's a deliberate, malicious lie. malicious lie. And Mayor Brandon Johnson and his team are pointing to a different set of numbers, and you can't just ignore them because, of course, we know that they're juicing the numbers. But according to the city's own data, which news outlets have reported on, Chicago is seeing a major drop in violent crime, supposedly. And official city data for 2025 show that the overall crime has declined by 13% from the previous year, and homicides have fallen by a staggering 51% since their peak in 2021. And they say this isn't some statistical fluke. It's the result of their strategy, and Mayor Johnson's team has been pushing what they call a holistic approach, investing in community violence intervention, youth employment, and mental health responders. And they restructure the police detective bureau, and clearance rates are at a highest point in over a decade. So you have two pictures of the same city. Not to mention that Mayor Brandon Johnson, he removed ShotSpotter, right? The things that hang up on the poles, so when the shot go off, they could get it pinged right at the police database, so they can actually get there right away. He removed ShotSpotter. So you have two different pictures of the same city that just don't add up. And one is a city drowning in chaos and so out of control that needs the military, and the order is that a city that's finally, after a tough fight, starting to turn a corner with community-based strategies that are actually working. So Mayor Johnson says Chicago is being targeted not because of crime, but because of its progressive politics. And it's a shining example of what happens when working people stand together. And that, he says, is what Trump's team really fears. And this basic disagreement over what's even happening on the ground is the whole issue. Is Chicago a failed city that needs a federal savior, or is it a city on the men whose progress is about to get stumped on by a politically motivated invasion? So the answer to that question changes everything, all right? Because if you step into the war room, and this is where the political shots are being fired. And man, it's escalating fast because on one side, you have the full power of the executive branch with a president who has never been shy about using aggressive language or to exert his authority and being intentional. And then on the other hand, you have a state and local leaders who are digging in for the political fight of their lives. So look, Trump's plan for Chicago isn't coming out of nowhere. He got a playbook. We saw them deploy thousands of National Guard members to patrol Washington, D.C., an action he called a miracle that brought total safety, which I got to give a round of applause for that one. And now he's been crystal clear. Chicago is next on the list. And his whole argument is simple and direct. Local leadership has failed, and he's called Mayor Johnson grossly incompetent and said that the city is a mess. And the idea is that when a city can't keep order and protect its own people, the federal government has a duty to step in. And who doesn't want a president that actually steps in to help the people? He's helping the people, obviously, because it's the classic law and order message that his base loves. And also, he's protecting Americans because how is Mayor Brandon Johnson really trying to do a holistic approach with community intervention if individuals in the community is killing each other and they dying off? That doesn't make no damn sense. So he claims, Donald Trump, he claims he can fix the crime problem in Chicago within 1 week, maybe less. And the strategy seems to paint these cities as dens of chaos and position himself as the only one strong enough to fix them. He's coming with a solution. And at the end of the day, it would be enormously embarrassing because Mayor Brandon Johnson couldn't do the job and he'll do it less than a week. And that tells you where priorities lies, because we know that in this case, Mayor Brandon Johnson likes to create problems and then he likes to run on that due to elections like he's going to fix them. So he's saying power as a mayor, but however, he's ignorant because he doesn't really care to resonate or care about the local Chicagoans as he claimed he does. And in response from Chicago, Illinois, as you see a total damn meltdown, and they're not having it because Governor JB Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson held a press conference right out in the open with the city skyline behind them. And the message was clear. We are defending our city, right? That's something Mayor Brandon Johnson would say. And then Governor Pritzker's language has been incredibly blunt. He accused the president of wanting to use the military to occupy U.S. city, punish his descendants, and score political points. And he calls Trump a wannabe dictator and promised that the state of Illinois is ready to stand against this military deployment with every peaceful tool we have. So, and he even told other governors J.B. Pritzker. He even told other governors not to let their guard troops be sent to Chicago. And his message to Trump, who said Pritzker should ask for help, was instead, I say, Mr. President, do not come to Chicago, and you are neither wanted here nor needed here. So Mayor Johnson was just as forceful because he calls the plan uncoordinated and uncalled for and unsound, and he argues that an unlawful military deployment would inflame tensions. But don't take my word for it. Check out what he had to say.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Your reaction to what you just heard?
Yeah. Well, listen, the president of the United States of America has repeated this, petulant presentation since he has assumed office. And, if the reporting is actually true, what he is proposing at this point would be the most flagrant violation of our Constitution in the 21st century. The city of Chicago does not need a military occupation. That's not what we need. In fact, we've been very clear about what we need. We need to invest in people to ensure that we can build safe and affordable communities. That's what I've done as mayor since assuming office. It's unfortunate that this president is working overtime to divide in his attempt to conquer working families and to conquer cities across America. But this is clearly a violation of the Constitution, and we're going to remain firm and vigilant in our commitment to ensure that our democracy is protected and our humanity is secured.
Mr. Mayor, it sounded like you said the White House had not been in touch with you at all about this. And I just want to make sure that I heard that right.
That is correct. There has been no formal communications from the Trump administration to my administration. There's been no formal communications from the White House to our governor. At this point, again, this is all, I believe, an attempt to frighten and to raise anxiety across America. Here's what we're doing in Chicago. The fact of the matter is violent crime is actually down in Chicago. We've reduced homicides by almost 32%. Shootings and shooting victims, we've reduced that by nearly 40%. Robberies are down 35%. There is certainly more work to be done, but we are moving towards building the safest, most affordable big city in America. And what the Trump administration is attempting to do is to roll back the hands of time and take us to a time period in which we know from the civil rights era where Dr. King described this type of act as one of the three evils. The militarization of our society is not who we are as a country. And I'm going to remain firm and vigilant to make sure that we're actually doing the work that works. And what we have seen in Chicago, when we invest in people, we drive violence down, whether it's investing in youth employment, investing in affordable homes, and quite frankly, investing in our Detectives Bureau, where we have revamped our entire detectives division to be able to solve violent crime. And we have a clearance rate of almost 77, 76%. And so we're solving crime, we're reducing crime, we're investing in people, and that's what's working for the people of Chicago.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we've talked about on this show a lot, and that me and Jonathan talk off air about a lot, is that this doesn't appear to be actually about crime. Because the cities that the president has talked about, these major cities, all of that crime has gone down. In Chicago, we have down 13.3%.
Whatever. But my thing is, he talking about Mayor Brandon Johnson basically saying that it's an unlawful military deployment. It would inflame tensions, right? When they're starting to build back and trust and see results. And he says the issue isn't a crime, it's the lack of investment. Well, it's a lack of investment on your behalf because you were the individual that were prioritizing legal immigrants over Chicagoans. And now that the legals is going, now you want to talk about how we got more things to do and getting the crime down and we got more work to do. Well, that should have been your priority in the first place. And on top of it, talking about investment in affordable homes. Well, if you have crime, right, and I'll give you an example, real life example. He said affordable homes and investing in the community and doing those things, right? Well, how you're going to invest in the community if you got Tay-Tay and Nene over here having kids, and then you got Day-Day and Shay-Shay, which is their kids, right? And they little monsters, and they destroying up the affordable homes, such as the investment and then it's still leaning into the crime that you say you're going to stop because there's no law and order. Because 9 times out of 10, the parents are just having kids that stay in an affordable home, and then you turn around and they're destroying the affordable home because they're not grateful, let alone they think they could do what they want to do when they want to do it, and they entitled, and then let alone the kids are not guided. And it has been statistically shown that a two-parent background is better, where kids are not necessarily prone to do things that is breaking the law, and they're actually more focus prone and actually more likely to be successful. But if you have individuals who having kids being incentivized by your investment that you have, but if your investment, as soon as you build the affordable home, get destroyed, and then these kids grow up degenerates, and then they have crimes committed, and there's no prioritize of law and order or safety, then you're just having a recurring problem of your investment getting destroyed, let alone communities getting destroyed. And that's why nobody want to open businesses there, and that's why the city won't continue to thrive. So you're putting more money into the problem, but you're not actually fixing the problem once again. But anyway, the National Guard, he says, the issue isn't crimes lack investment. He said the National Guard will not alleviate the housing crisis. It will not put food in the stomachs of the 1 in 4 children that go to bed hungry every night in Chicago. And the National Guard is no substitute for dedicated local law enforcement and community violence interpreters who know and serve our communities every day. And it's not just them. You got a whole coalition of Illinois leaders and senators and members of Congress, the attorney general, all standing together against what they see as a flagrant abuse of power. And they say if the president really wanted to help, he could restore the hundreds of millions in federal funding for the violence prevention that got cut. Well, the thing is, with that violence prevention, who's to say that the violence prevention is really taking place when Mayor Brandon Johnson got rid of ShotSpotter? Look it up, family. So anyway, they could be saying that money going anywhere on paper, just the same way they're saying crime is down on paper, but it's really not. So, and he's saying that Donald Trump could work with them on gun safety laws to stop illegal guns from flowing into the city. Well, if you know and you got all these answers to know what to do in your city, then why isn't it being done? And then Donald Trump got to do it, but then you got a whole rap sheet about telling Donald Trump what he should do when he about to come in here and do better than you, but less than a week. Because the thing is, if you didn't need Donald Trump help, you wouldn't have none of this visibility coming to you in the first place, because you wouldn't have none of these damn problems. It's just common sense. So the leaders of Chicago think it's all a setup, a manufactured crisis. They pointed out that there's been no official call from the White House, no consultation. You heard them, nothing. They believe the plan was cooked up in secret for political shock value with zero thought for the consequences. And Governor Pritzker basically said if this was really about fighting crime, what possible justification could the White House have for planning such an exceptional action with any conversations with the governor, the mayor, or the police? Good question, right? So the lines are drawn. On one side, the president claiming absolute authority and trying to clean up the crime and bring more back safety, and also have people be able to tour the city and embrace Chicago as it once was beautiful. And on the other, a city and state fiercely defending their own progress that they ain't even making. But now this whole war of words is about to hit a brick wall, because the law, can the president even do this? So this where it gets really interesting and honestly a little scary, because forget the politicians for a second. The real fight might be in the courts, because the big question, can a president just send a military into a U.S. city when the governor and the mayor are screaming no? And the answer is buried in a bunch of complex laws. And at the heart of it is the deep American distrust of using soldiers as cops. And this is the red tape that Democrats like to make. So then it gives them loops and holes and loopholes that they know of to basically get their way and stay in power, and not even try to get law and order in their city, which I believe should be a bipartisan agreement, Democrat or Republican. We should always prioritize the safety of Americans. Why is this even up to debate? I would have just been like, come on, come on, come on, help me. Shoot. So first, there's this old law that go way back to 1878 called the Post Commodities Act. Bottom line, it's a federal crime to use the Army or Air Force to enforce domestic laws unless Congress or the Constitution specifically says you can. So this law was passed to stop the military from meddling in state businesses, and it's based on the core idea that standing army shouldn't be turned on its own people. So right there, it seems like the answer is a clear no. and Pritzker and Johnson keep calling Trump's plan illegal and unconstitutional because it looked like it completely violates this act. But then the National Guard's main job is to answer to the governor for state emergencies, not act as a federal police force. But this is a huge but. There's an exception because it's called the Insurrection Act. And this act passed way back in 1807, gives the president the authority to deploy the military inside the U.S. to stop a rebellion or enforce federal laws. Now, part of the act says the president can send troops if a governor asks for help to stop an insurrection. And that's what happened in LA during the 1992 riots. But that's not happening here because Pritzker has basically said, hell no. So this brings us to the really controversial parts of the act. One section lets the president deploy the troops when he decides that the unlawful obstructions make it impossible to enforce U.S. laws. And then another goes even further, allowing it when an insurrection or conspiracy is stopping people from exercising their constitutional rights and the state authorities are unable, failed, or refuse to protect those rights. So this is the legal loophole they will likely try to use, and they could argue that the crime in Chicago is so bad, it's depriving citizens of their right to safety, and the local government can't or won't fix it. And then the Trump administration has argued that the Title 10 of the U.S. Code gives the president authority to federalize the guard when there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion. And historically, courts have been very hesitant to second guess a president's judgment call on that. And this is where it gets legally murky and dangerous because the Supreme Court has generally said it's up to the president to decide when an emergency exists that justifies using these powers. Plus, some are saying that a recent Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity could make it even tougher to challenge him in court. So you see the problem, right? You have one law that says you can't do this, and then another says, well, maybe you can if you say it's emergency. So critics are screaming this would be a massive abuse of power, just using the law as a weapon to target political opponents. And the ACLU says Trump is manufacturing emergencies to expand his power. So this legal showdown is pretty much unprecedented in modern times, using the Insurrection Act to impose a federal vision of law enforcement on the city that is rejecting it, especially when crime is reportedly going down and it's completely new territory. Illinois has vowed a court battle, and however that fight ends, it could redefine the balance of power in this country for generations. So we're diving deep into some incredibly complex and controversial stuff here, and it's vital that we keep having a conversation if you believe it's crucial to analyze these power dynamics and understand what they mean for our communities. Take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn your post notifications on because your support allows me to keep digging beyond the headlines and asking the tough questions. And be sure to stick around because next, we're moving from the courtroom to the streets to ask the most important question of all. What would this military presence actually mean for you and your family? So let's get past the lawyers and politicians now. Let's talk about what it really means, the human cost. What would it actually be like for regular people, for families living in Chicago if this goes down? I mean, picture it. You walk out your apartment, Lincoln Park on the south side to grab a coffee, and there's a Humvee parked on your street corner. You see soldiers in camo carrying rifles patrolling the same streets where your kids play. And this isn't some movie scene. This is potentially reality we talking about. And the first thing you feel is a complete change in the city's atmosphere. Armed troops, and I believe at the end of the day, when you look at it, it brings security. Kids could come back outside and, that's the very thing, right? Because if your city isn't thriving when it comes to safety, I mean, everything else could go down with it. The education, the communities, visitors. So when you look at it, we got two completely different futures for Chicago and really for the whole country. And the path we choose here and the principles we decide are very important. We define the relationship between the government and its people for a long, long time. And President Trump's envisions federal power comes first because it's a future where if a city is deemed a mess, the federal government can step in hard with our local approval, right? And the military is a tool to be used to impose order on American streets. And it's a future that puts safety and security above everything else, arguing that civil liberties don't mean much if you're not safe in your own home, which I happen to believe and agree with, because this is the tough medicine America needs. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I know I talked about a lot on I Know Family. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give this video a big thumbs up. Catch you in the next one. Peace.